Hello and welcome to the SIFCon Creating a Shared Universe panel and this inaugural SIFCon 2020. I am Amy, aka DuBoff, and I am a space opera and space fantasy author. I will be your moderator for this, and we're here with a wonderful panel that all of them have a shared universe that they write in, and some of them have multiple universes that they have created. So I will let them introduce themselves. Mark, let's start with you. Oh, unmute.
Oh. Don't try this at home, kids. We're professionals. My name is Mark Wandrey. I'm the co-creator of the Four Horsemen universe, military sci-fi universe with Chris Kennedy. Right now, as of today, there are 59 books in this universe that we've written over 4 years. I've also created a couple other universes, one space opera and one zombie apocalypse. Been writing for about 25 years and 10 of that professionally.
Awesome. And Martha?
I'm Martha Carr, and I'm a co-creator of the Oristarian universe with Michael Anderle. It has over 200 books in it, and it was created in 2017, and it's made over $1 million. And also a younger universe, Terra Novis, which we started this year and has about 4 series in it.
Awesome.
And it's fantasy and urban fantasy, by the way, that we do.
Very cool. And Mal?
My name is Mallory Cooper, and I write under MD Cooper. I've created a universe called the Aeon 14 universe, and at present we have 106 novels in it, and there are 9 different authors writing in the universe.
I feel so humble with my little 16 book shared universe, but it's growing quickly. I have lots of co-authors working on new books. So I am the creator of the Catacomb universe. It began with an original series, and then I have the Mindspace Quartet that was a spinoff, and then I began bringing in co-authors, and now have the Verity Chronicles, which is a trilogy, the Shadowed Space series, which is also a trilogy, and there are others that are forthcoming in that. And we're also in the process of working on a TV adaptation for the universe, and we'll be discussing that in the panel after this. So a shared universe, for anyone who doesn't know, is essentially a story setting in which multiple authors produce works. So oftentimes there is a universe owner who then brings on others to collaborate within that universe. So question to the panelists, how do you begin the process of preparing your universe to have collaborators come in?
Should we just jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
So I have found that you have to first create a universe that has enough depth and space, and I found that it has to have its own mythology, a backstory that goes back quite a ways, that has enough details so that when you start to pull a thread, there's room for somebody else to find interest over there, and they can explore that. And then you have to create the base story that gives the basic rules, so that whoever comes after you kind of gets how everything works. But the mythology is very important, by the way. Without it, it becomes a little thin.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely need that foundation there.
Yeah, I would agree. For my universe, it's actually basically a future history for our civilization. So it's kind of nice in a way that I can just simply go all the way back to modern times, what we would consider to be modern times. So it creates a really deep backstory. And the tricky thing, of course, I guess we're talking about preparing it, is you have to understand your setting really well. So if someone comes to ask you a question, one of your co-authors, you can tell them what to do. If you don't know what to do, then you're in trouble. And on top of that, too, there has to be a very small group of people who are making sure that everything aligns. Otherwise, you'll also run into problems with continuity, and then the whole thing starts to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say more than anything, be prepared to let go, because you're going to lose a lot of control as this happens. We started off with 1 book that became 4 books, and halfway through that process, Chris Kennedy and I decided to do a couple of anthologies because we thought this would be a great opportunity to help color, paint between the numbers, I guess you could say. Now, 4 years later, we've had 9 anthologies and probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 authors have written in the Four Horsemen universe, at least in the short form, with a couple of dozen written in long form. And I created the Bible early on that we had them all write from. And we had to be prepared to let it run with it because we had a lot of ideas in there, and we got 20 submissions for the first book that had 14 story spaces in it, and a lot of really good stuff, and some stuff that really wasn't so good. But by letting the authors do what they wanted to do, we kind of let it go wild. Now, 4 years later, we have an overarching story plot line that we have to be able to carefully control on. I'm feeling emails today on somebody who wants to do a novel project that's going to, we can't let them do, I don't think, because it's crashing into what else we're trying to do. So let it go, but also, I guess, as Mallory mentioned, you got to keep some control. Otherwise, it's not a universe anymore. It's just kind of a kaleidoscope.
Yeah, I think that.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Martha.
I was going to say, I do check, everybody who collaborates, I do look at their outlines to make sure that there isn't anybody who's gone, south too far. But if they don't have any kind of freedom to create, then it's not fun for them either. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I try to do too is if they've come up with some side characters or beings with the series that I'm writing, I try to, maybe occasionally use one of them so that they all interconnect back and forth and back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, when I was beginning the process, it was first going through and making sure that everything was documented, that did exist already. And so I created what I call a style guide. Sometimes they're called universe Bibles. But I think it's important to revisit your own work and start to figure out what some of those parameters are in there. Are you just making sure that it's very clear how if you have sci-fi, how the FTL works, or if you have more fantasy setting, how the magic system works, who has the ability to do certain things, what does the political environment look like, what is the average life like for an everyday citizen, can they easily get from one place to another? Just all of those things will dictate the types of stories that you can tell, and then you can begin carving out those corners of the universe. So I found it important to also make sure that my co-authors had the ability to be very creative and have freedom with what they wanted to do with their stories. So I was like, okay, well, you can have this little corner of the galaxy, and things need to connect in X ways, but whatever you do within the characters there, you can make up your own planets, and you want to create a new lower dynasty. Sure, you can't mess with the high dynasties because those exist on the central world, but you can create other highborn to add into the universe. So I think just do an honest evaluation of the places that can have people come into it and add their own flair without it impacting the underpinnings that would make it turn into something other than what the universe is. So I have my style guide. Do the rest of you, and Mark already mentioned having the universe Bible. So Martha and Mal, do you?
Yeah. Or Saren at 3 years old is like ancient, and it's got so many books in it that I don't remember everything. And not only do we have a wiki and style guide, we have readers who are a core group who seem to remember every detail and can tell you what page and what book you can find something.
Some of our readers remember stuff better than we do.
Yeah. And so that helps tremendously because, even in the series I write, I have forgotten so much. And I have to go back and ask, which arm did he lose? I can't remember. But also on the Bible thing, on the creating the universe too, one thing we didn't mention was I've noticed that everybody, even there are tropes that are in, say, urban fantasy that we all have to kind of play by. But then it seems like every universe has their own individual, very unique tropes. Like ours is very positive, and we don't have much angst, and we don't do cliffhangers. And the collaborator has to that seems to be very, very key that they understand that ahead of time, or we run into brick walls.
That's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought that up. That tone is a big component of it, as well as just getting the tech right.
Yeah. We do a style guide and a Bible, actually, because Chris Kennedy's the publisher, so he's the one who's kind of running everything through it first. I'm the person that kind of shapes the whole overarching storyline. So we get a lot of stuff that's submitted in, and you'd mentioned, Martha had mentioned how you like she has high empires and low empires she does within a universe. A lot of that's similar with ours, that in the Horseman universe, Earth is kind of the sacred place where where humanity is, so you have to be careful what we do there. But we let people write all these other races. It's a whole galaxy, tens of thousands of races, but only 46 mercenary races within it, and those we've been carefully controlling. So it's like, if you want to have your ball and play with it too, you have to get off the main court. But if you want to play within the central story, you have to submit to us and say, okay, this is what I want to do with this race, and I want this to happen, and so on and so forth. So we're kind of having our cake and eating it too in some cases, but we do give them room to play. So that's why we have the style guide, that they can do whatever they want within certain areas. They explain kind of how things work, and then they can do whatever they want with it.
Yeah. So sorry, Mallory, go ahead.
I was going to say that I don't have a style guide. I don't have a Bible as well. Part of that is because my universe grew so fast, and there was so much setting in it that creating one would have been the work of months. And I wanted instead just to write books. So basically, and I knew something as well, was that I wanted to be the bottleneck. I didn't want to create a system that could run faster than I could. So every single story, every single outline, every single final review goes through me. So there's a maximum speed at which Aeon 14 can go. But by doing that, I made sure that everything could work. Authors could still have their freedom, and I didn't have to spend an inordinate amount of time managing. Because for Aeon 14, quite honestly, a style guide for Aeon 14 would be larger than the Encyclopedia Britannica. It would be unconscionably large to maintain something like, because it's all the way down to like, what's the energy levels you need to make a proton beam hit its Bragg peak within the human body. Like, that sort of detail is in the series, and that's it's pretty extreme. So it's honestly easier just not to have a Bible for me.
Yeah. When you bring in new authors, this question to all of you, do you require that the author have read works within your universe?
We don't require it, but we know when they haven't.
And you, it's always worked better when somebody who wants to write the universe actually likes the universe and may have read it because they enjoyed it, and that always it's worked so much better. Their enthusiasm, they come in with ideas, and I don't know that you want somebody writing in your universe who really isn't that interested in what already exists.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Everyone who writes in Aeon 14 has read a lot of the books. Not everyone has read all of the books anymore, but because Aeon 14 spans 9,000 years, people can kind of just read their segment of books. But I found at this point, the best place to find co-authors is in the fan base, because they've read all the books and they are excited and have ideas and are invested in the characters and whatnot. So it's much easier actually to bring them, because like Mark mentioned, lots of them know the details better than anyone else does. So you don't have to worry, like, do they understand where things are going, or what ship was where, or what kind of technology was here, what kind of people lived there. They already know it all. So they have an idea for a story that fits in the system already.
It's often part of the fun for us as writers too.
We did a fans write for fans, or an anthology where fans got the chance to do their own story, and we found writers that way, and that was a great way to do it too, because you got a feel for how well they write, etc. We found T.R. Cameron; he's been great.
Yeah, we did open submissions for every anthology we've done so far. We've had open submissions, and the openings vary between 2 or 3 positions to earlier on as many as 6 of them, I think, were new authors. We found some incredible new authors by just through open submissions. And many of them were very perceptive about how the world works. They were well written. They followed the rules. They read the Bible. They did what they needed to do.
Yeah, I've done that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very cool way of handling it. I also, when I was taking on my initial authors, picked people who had voluntarily read the original Catacomb series. I mean, it's 5-book long. It's not a huge commitment to go in there. It's like, if you don't want to read just that one thing, then I don't know if you really want the follow through for doing I was asking most people to do a trilogy just from a marketing standpoint. I have a couple people just working on standalones as well, but But yeah, I think coming in with I'm a fan of this universe and I have this idea that I want to bring, because I think having that passion coming into the project is really key and comes through in how it's written. Mm-hmm. So Mallory has already said that she's the main person to look at everything. I handle my Catechol universe the same way, and I essentially function as the developmental editor on all of the books. So rather than using an outside person, so I will make sure that all of the tech and characters and tone and everything aligns with what I have established as the Catechol universe standard. So Mark and Martha, do you also review every work, or what is your process for maintaining that consistency?
I do review every work, and especially the newer somebody is to the universe, no matter how well they write, there's going to be tweaking and smoothing out, but it does get easier the longer somebody writes in the universe. The more I'm reading it for enjoyment, and there's not as much back and forth. But yeah, you have to keep track, because then somebody new comes in. Now the knowledge base has to be based on what I've written and what everyone else has written. And when it comes to Or Saren, I'm probably the only person who knows the entire thing. I mean, if I die, it all goes. And and so in order for that to be accurate, I actually have to know what everybody else is up to. And then I also know when somebody might inadvertently be stepping on someone else's toes. They're enthusiastic about this thing they're about to do, but I know it's going to crash into somebody else's idea. So you have to, if you're the head cheese of, somebody has to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of took it within steps within the Horseman universe with Chris and I. We started with just him and me, and then we built outwards. And as we brought in authors, which all started in the first anthology, all of them ended up within our group. And I realized we had a kind of a circle. We call them core authors. It was me, Chris Kennedy, Kevin Eikenberry, Marisa Wolf, and Casey Ezell. And then we added John Osborne down the road. And each of us kind of have an area. Me and Chris share the whole thing, but the others have areas that are their specialty. And we literally handed it off to them. So if something comes in that they want to write within a certain area, like somebody wants to write about Depik, these cat assassin race, or somebody wants to write about the Peacemakers, we aim them at those authors who are in charge of those areas. That's let us kind of shift the load a little bit. Ultimately, Chris and I are the final say. We each literally have like a vote. We can veto each other. One of us doesn't like what the other wants to do, we can say, no, we don't want to do it. Luckily, that's never happened. We've always been on the same page. Everything's worked really well. Chris is the first doorkeeper, and then if it gets past him and he says, well, this is within the core story, I want Mark to look at it, he'll send me the proposal and I'll read it through and I'll have my input. And that's kind of our process. It's worked really well. Our output's been obviously pretty good with 4 years and 60 books. You really can't argue too much about that. And we haven't managed to step on each other's toes yet. We've had a few times where we were like not happy about something that one or the other wants to do, but we've worked through it because it's a partnership we've developed for years.
So you, both of you have touched on a little bit that idea of stepping on one of the other co-authored series within there and crashing into each other a little bit. So I think that's less an issue in Aeon 14 because, Mallory, I believe you've mostly driven what a lot of those stories are going to be and have kind of defined, well, I think we want to do this arc versus just having it more open for some of your ideas and we'll see if it fits or not. So when you're getting those submissions from other authors and they're pitching you on what they want to do, I know for myself, I've run into a couple of situations where someone has given this idea, it's like, well, that's actually a little bit similar to something else that someone has proposed, not in the same place or in the same way, but like this plot arc is looking a little similar and I don't want it to be too repetitive. So how do you handle those situations of working collaboratively with an author to make sure that it's distinct, but still going to be fun and something they enjoy?
Mostly you have to brainstorm alternatives is what it comes down to. You have to, I've had it happen twice now where very similar plot arcs were happening. And not only were happening, but we're going to come out like within weeks of each other. So that was going to be no bueno. So I would have to sit down and say like, this is the element that is basically mirrored in other person's story. And sometimes it was like, it was opposite of the direction. Like the universe was going one way and they were going to take the exact same thing and go the other way. It's like, well, that won't work. because this has to be consistent. So usually it's just talking about like, well, here's a specific thing. How important to you is this particular plot element or this particular part of the setting? And if it's super important, then you got to figure a way around it. If it's not, you're like, can we just not do this? And focus on something else.
Yeah, it's exactly how we handle those situations too. There's a few things that are just stoppers. You can't do it. The old joke originally was that no antimatter, no artificial gravity. It's kind of these constants within the universe. And there's a few other things that we do, but inevitably you get a pitch and when they don't mention any of this kind of stuff, then they write the book and you get it and he goes, well, you're breaking this rule, you're breaking that rule. We've had a few sore feelings. We send a book back with big check marks on it. Got to fix it. Can't do it. We've almost always got them back. I don't think we've ever had one unfixable book yet. The biggest problems we've had actually has been in anthologies with large name authors who just had a story they wanted to give us. We're like, this doesn't fit in our universe. We can't do that. That kind of stuff, But yeah, I mean, I'm with Mallory. There's usually something. Usually, you could fix everything if the author can really fix it.
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me was when I had someone approach and say, I want to do aliens. I'm like, well, we don't really do that. But then I started thinking about it and went back and talked with some of the other collaborators. And we have now introduced 2 new alien races that are coming in, which I was not anticipating at all when I had opened up the universe, but I'm super excited with what we've done with it, and it's just opened up this whole other realm of possibilities.
Outside authors can be amazing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm so happy that I let people in and didn't just immediately shut down that idea. So I think that's a good takeaway from it. Is it's something. There are certain things that you definitely cannot break because it's like down to the foundational physics of your universe. But perhaps story-wise, there are some places that you weren't necessarily considering going, but sit on it for a little bit and let it percolate. And perhaps there is going to be some way that you can incorporate that and turn it into something even cooler than what you had originally planned.
I think that goes to what Mark was saying earlier when he said that you're going to have to let go. You need control, but to some degree, you're going to have to let go of your darlings and let the thing fly.
Oh, I had a great little story about that. There was fairly early on when Casey Azell, I mentioned, was coming in. She wrote a short story about one of the races in our universe called Tortantulas, which are these giant spiders with like chipmunks riding on their back with guns. Not as crazy. Well, yeah, it is as crazy as it sounds, but still fun. I had wanted to write a story about them down the road, but she beat me to it, and I was like, "But I want to write that." I almost had a kind of a temper tantrum over that because I really wanted to do it. And Chris, my co-writer, he was like, "You're acting like a kid. Grow up. This is like a really great story." So I agreed and ended up co-writing the book Casey Azell about those races. So it ended up being probably better than either one of us could have ever done. Well, better than I could have did. She's a fantastic writer. She brings all these levels of emotions to it. That was that letting go. And that was that cathartic moment I realized that I can't control all of this. And what they're going to write is better than what I could have wrote by myself. And the end effect was awesome. But letting go is not easy as a writer. We all have our little sandboxes and we like moving our little chess pieces around there. But other people reach in and move a piece. You're like, hey, what are you doing?
Oh, and especially that moment when someone else is writing your character that you created for the first time. That was a big one for me. But I am so happy with how they have done those characters justice. But there is that moment of, oh, you're about to write dialogue for this person. Oh, no.
So
were you doing this?
Amy, you allow collaborators to also use characters that you created? Because we do not do that.
So the TSS is a very central component of my universe. So by necessity, certain characters that are in key positions within the TSS need to be shared characters.
Okay.
I have a much heavier hand in those scenes than I would otherwise, and people will clear it. In some cases, we have done point of view characters with some people that were secondary characters in my other series. So they had screen time before, but were never someone whose head you were really inside. So this has been an opportunity to expand those. So that's been a fun experience.
Can you just explain that, Martha? Like, there's never any crossovers between any of the books, or
no. Well, no. I mean, if there's been a very little, and when there was, I checked those scenes particularly to make sure that it sounded like the character. But no, there's really no crossover.
Wow.
It's kind of almost opposite with ours, because it's called the Four Horsemen universe because these 4 mercenary companies are the 4 horsemen. They all have horses in their logos. It's really a simple explanation, but Chris has 2 of them and I have 2 of them, and everybody wants to write something about them. Nobody else can write books that are specifically about them, but they turn up in a lot of books, and we let that happen, and the characters within them, and they will appear, and we're just very careful about that. We're like, send it to us. We need to look at it. We need to prove what happened. And usually those appearances are what's the word? Transcendental? That's not right. I'm a writer. I should know these words. Anyway, yeah, it's like they're not the central element of the story, but they can appear, and we're just careful about how we do it. And like Amy said, that's very nervous when you have somebody writing a scene with your characters in it, because each of these characters have their own personalities, and Chris and I have very carefully written them. The first book we ever wrote in this universe, I wrote, was Cartwright's Cavaliers, and the kid is kind of a brony. He's an overweight kid, kind of a loser that ends up inheriting the mercenary company because his mom ruined it, and he has to grow up and kind of become this greater than life character, because the Cavaliers are one of the greatest mercenary units ever, and you expect this big brawny dude with ripped muscles and stuff, and he likes pizza more than fighting actually most of the time, so he's not exactly what you'd expect. So other people have tried to write about him as kind of this bigger than life character, and it's not how he is. So yeah, I'm kind of babbling, but that's kind of what goes on.
I should say there is some crossover in some of the books, but I wrote all the books where there's crossover. But collaborators, there is no crossover in the characters, except maybe a scene where someone showed up and those are, makes it easy to check. But yeah, collaborators, that was one of the rules we started with, was you can borrow anything but somebody else's character.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I have one collaborator series where there's no crossover. Every other one has crossover with characters. It's kind of fascinating how it can work either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think both strategies can be effective. It's just knowing how your own system works. So circling back to the idea of having the universe style guides or Bibles, however you would like to talk to them, have you ever thought about making that information public at all and publishing it so readers can view it as well?
Mm-hmm. And then I think I'm gonna have to explain all this stuff in detail, and my readers are gonna poke holes in it, so I don't. Some of them are watching too. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I think of Mel. That's a very good point.
They'd be like, "Well, you codified this, but you did differently in that book." I'm like, "Oh, crap."
Yeah.
We really thought about it, that's for sure. I mean, we're in the process of developing our role-playing game now. It's going to be a Savage Worlds. We've got the license. We're getting ready to launch the Kickstarter because there's a previous project that wasn't done. That was a Kickstarter, so we don't want to, it's not fair to go to the fans. It's like constantly like you're fishing for more money, So we wanted to make sure the deck was clear. And with that, a lot of the Bible things are going to be incorporated into the role-playing game. So no, we're not going to release the Bible, but actually anybody who wants to write, we send a lot of that to them. But the reason we have to be careful about it is because there are several of these long mysteries within this universe that are part of our long story arc, and 2 or 3 of these big secrets have never been revealed. So we can't put them in the Bible and go, here you go. And then someone in a conversation goes, oh, that race is actually this or that. And, it's all gone. As everybody, a lot of our fans also want to write. So the answer is yes, with caveats as far as the Bible goes.
I am in a very similar situation with that, where my style guide includes more details than I want to be publicly available. So I'm in the process of looking to build out more of a wiki type site that will have the public facing information that I'm okay explaining, but there are certain other aspects that I think will always remain a little bit private. But I do like having an online glossary at least available for readers to go reference some things. And I would like to continue building that out, especially as the universe grows.
The wiki is awesome if you have the manpower to do it.
Yeah, that's been the main concerning factor. I decided to run a convention instead of doing that. So I mean, it's just it's a matter of time and bandwidth to do that. But I think having references for the readers to go in and be able to easily find information about the universe, especially as you do have the crossovers, is helpful. So what advice do you have for authors looking to get into someone's universe?
Money? No. My advice would be that, well, I mean, I don't know what everybody else is doing, but we have a Facebook page for general fans, and we actually are looking out to have a fan organization. We're not in control of that or anything. They're completely independent. They consult with us, but we have no control over them. And find their social media presence and talk to them. I mean, about the rest of you, I'm sure you're all addressable. We're not in some mountain, so everything's gone through. Send me a message. Talk to some of the other authors who've written into it and say, hey, how did that process happen? And that's ultimately that every new author within the universe, there's always a point of contact. And usually it's talking to the creative controllers and asking, you guys open to an idea? That would be the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think my biggest piece of advice would be, if you want to write in a world, have it be a world that you're passionate about. Don't just be drawn to it because I see a lot. This seems like the cool new place to go, so I want to get in there too. But have it be something that you're really interested in and committed in, because you do really have to immerse yourself in the world to do it right. And the readers will pick up on if it's just kind of just in there versus being something that they really care about.
If someone writes to me and says that they want to write, say, an Orsarin, the first two things I'm going to want to know is, what have you written previously, so I can go take a look, and what idea do you have? Because the idea is going to tell me whether or not you understand Orsarin and whether or not it fits, and have you come up with something clever that would, bring a new twist to it. And you accomplish those two things, first we want to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, someone would have to have read pretty much all of the books in the time frame that they want to write in. Would be a requirement for me. Just because the storyline is really interwoven and complex, and if they haven't done that, then there's no way they can put together a proposal that's going to work. So
we're getting to the point that we are now, Valerie.
Yeah, and so that's why I mentioned before, that's why I can only really go for fans now, because they're the only ones that have read all the stuff. But the plus side is there's lots of fans out there who actually can write well. And two of my co-authors who've actually gone into their own careers, James S. Aaron and Lisa Richmond, both started off as fans of Aeon 14, wrote in the series for a while, and now are full-time authors in their own right. So it worked really well. I found great authors that produce great content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it goes back to that passion. It really goes through. And there are so many people that are good writers that don't even realize how good of writers they are. So I love what, Martha, you have done with the fans write for the fans idea and having a place to showcase that. That's really cool.
You also get a really close-up look at how well someone writes when you go through the process with them, but on a short story as opposed to an entire series.
Yeah, and it's very different looking at someone's finished writing sample and the Kindle look inside versus what you're going to be getting as a raw manuscript coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, those can be very different things.
Yeah, they can. So do you use, since you have a bunch of co-authors that you're working with, and those people are all coming with different backgrounds, do you tap into those individual skill sets that they're bringing? Like, this person's really sciencey. Do you bring them in to help build out a certain component of your universe, or maybe someone's a psychologist and you look at them for looking at character personality, or what?
We found. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Everyone's too polite.
Because we're writing, ours is not really far future. The Four Horsemen universe begins in an event that takes place in 2025. And then we start writing seriously, though, 100 years later. So it is in the future, but it's not super far. It's not like Dune, which is 10,000 years in the future. So a lot of our technology is more grounded in what you'd expect today. There's less things that are different. There's fusion power, sure, and there's laser guns and all this sort of stuff, but there's none of this crazy technology like you'd run into Star Wars. Star Wars is like hyper advanced stuff, while I probably shouldn't have mentioned Star Wars. More like Star Trek. Star Trek is very advanced. They've got doing 20,000 G turns, hyper speeds and stuff. It's like, no, other than having faster than light travel, which is gate travel, basically, our speeds tend to be much more like what you can encounter what's realistic today. So with that in mind, we commonly use scientists to talk about what can be done and what can't. Stephanie Osborne, we've used her several times to consult with her. We've used another couple scientists we have that are nuclear physicists. One of our writers is Robert Hansen, who is he's helping develop implants right now in your brain to help counteract Alzheimer's and such. And he has written Creatures in Our Universe and about the pinplant technology we have that allows you to interface computers. So we use him with this so that it's literally based on science that we're developing now.
Cool.
So we do have some specialists in that area, but also because it's military science fiction, most of our authors tend to be former military. In fact, as a creator, I'm one of the few that isn't. Almost all of the others are. Chris Kennedy is a former naval aviator. Kevin Eikenberry, he was a tanker. Casey Azell, she's a Air Force major right now, and she flies helicopters. We get a lot of that. It helps writing military science fiction if you have people in the military. So we will throw things out in directions of those people who are experts. I think absolutely that's a powerful thing to have with it.
I was going to say, Michael Angeli and I have found that when we can learn more about you and your personality and what you like to do and your personal interests, and if we can then craft the idea you have so it's really in your lane, the stories we get writing has just been far more exciting. The readers have responded far more to that once we kind of figured out it's not just your expertise, but it's also where your passions are, and even down to the minutia. I mean, we have somebody who was really into parkour. I think that's how you say it. And as a sideline, so we said we should work that into the story. And it really, you really have to get to know your collaborator on a more of a level than I expected in the beginning, and it really helps in shaping the story.
Yeah, I get a lot of that as well. As much like not so much even just their job experience, but their life experience and what that's been passionate about. Like James S. Aaron was in charge of a lot of logistics for the Army, and so whenever James writes a book, there's always something that doesn't arrive on time. Someone's like fucked up delivering something. They can't get the supplies to the right place, and he always incorporates some sort of like bonehead human error that's exactly what you'd experience in the real world into his stories. Lisa's really good at writing thrillers, which is kind of funny because she actually writes freakishly good villains. But she also writes pilot porn every now and then. Like she's a pilot. And so every now and then, one of her books is going to have someone's going to be flying an aircraft, and there's just going to be some raw pilot porn that just goes right into her story, which is to say, she's just completely nerding out all the pilot stuff. There's not actually like a Mile High Club sort of thing going on, just to put that out there. And then my wife, Jill, when she writes in the universe, she's really good at interpersonal conflict. So if I want to have a story where the main characters are at each other's throats, betraying one another, causing a lot of problems, I actually leverage her for that. And sometimes I'll actually bring them into stories that aren't their stories. I would say like, hey, how would you write this? Or can you write a scene, take these two characters and make them hate each other when they currently like each other? And Jill can do that. So it's a fun thing to tap.
Yeah, I love all of the individual perspectives and skills that people bring in. I think the biggest one for me has definitely been on the tech side of things. I will readily admit that the Catacomb universe is much more on the space fantasy than the sci-fi realm in terms of level of functionality. However, as I've had people come in and begin collaborating who really do like the hard SF, like, well, if you handle your tech in this way, and I actually talked to Mallory a little bit too when I was starting to build out the co-authorship, like, well, how could I sort of go in and explain how this tech works in a way that would be maybe not scientifically grounded, but at least sound like convincing technobabble. And so having the people come in who can offer that expertise has been really great, and it's been fun to look at my own universe in a different way. It's like, well, I totally just made up that thing, but it actually could kind of work if you look at it in this way. And that was something that I didn't know about before. So that's been a really fun exploratory experience.
Chris, being a former naval aviator, he loves he flew A-10 not A-10, he flew A-6 intruders, which are basically bombers. And he's wanted them in this universe so badly, but because we don't have anti-gravity and all this, there's not this place for fighters within it. So when we had an opportunity to kind of flip them in, he was like all over that idea. It's like, yes, I finally get to write that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, each person does love writing their own thing. Kevin Eigenberry, he likes tanks. There's really no tanks. There's mobile armor. So he's never been a happy camper.
Oh, sad. So what about in terms of creating a sense of community? Do you have a group or a channel somewhere that's just specifically for the writers that are working in the universe?
Yes, we do. There's the Chris Kennedy Publishing Author Stable. So basically, if you publish anything for Chris, you're within there. And since most of the books tend to be Four Horsemen, well, it's kind of actually about 50-50 now. All of the authors are all there, and people love to talk about projects and promotion, what we're doing. I'm running Facebook ads for the first time, so I've been talking about with people about how that works and is it profitable, does it help, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's a great resource, especially because we even invite anybody, even people who haven't published, people who want to are in there too. So they're seeing the process that goes on, and that gets them more prepared, I think, when their books finally come out. What to do, how to promote them, how to do all these sort of things. So finishing the book, you're not done yet. You really just kind of got started.
Yeah, I currently have a small Slack community. I think we might be moving to Discord in the future, but starting out on Slack for now, since it's still small.
I mostly use Slack, and we gather in channels, or we'll do Zoom sometimes just so we can see each other's face and talk things through. But you know, writers by their nature also like to go off into their cubby and write, and come up occasionally to gather together and then go back in their cubby.
I use Slack, and then eventually I use Discord. Although Discord the community kind of fell apart. It didn't really have the same gel that it had in Slack, interestingly. Although at the same time, like, I was sort of winding down new co-author projects, so we'll see what happens. Although Slack is great for fans. I mean, Discord is great for fans. The fans love Discord, and they're in there all the time talking, so it's kind of handy that way.
So how do you handle the financial aspects of the relationship? And you could get into however much detail you're comfortable sharing, but it was a question from the audience.
Well, there needs to be a contract that is very, very clear, that is upfront and first, and you give the person time to go through it. You know, if they need an attorney to look at it, that's great. But you want to do that early on before money, you know, real money that's earned or anything else like that is involved, and it should spell out everything, so that if they see something they don't like, that's when you have the conversation about, you know, back and forth. But really, it's the contract that will spell it all out. I
think that should be taken care of before they write anything as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Like before any work is done, so that there's never any argument about who owns anything or how it's all going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of done both ways with us, because new authors, you often want to see what they're going to do before we get past the stage of a pitch before contracts are even spoken about. I mean, they've asked sometimes, and then it'll be explained to them about what they can expect. And as you know, I mean, pros who are established will have different arrangements than ones that relatively new authors. Now, we treat everybody fairly, of course, but because it's a shared universe, you know, there's stages of percentages here. You know, certain people are going to get some of the percentage of this deal no matter what. And, you know, because it's that IP issue, a few of them have been like, well, why is so-and-so getting some? It's like, well, because we're all involved in this universe. So there are parts that are shared out, and the percentages work differently. But you guys are absolutely right. If you haven't done this before and you want to write something like this, make sure you understand that, you know, you don't get all the money, and the publisher doesn't get all the money. There should be equitable divisions here of how this works. If you don't feel like you're going to get a fair deal, don't sign the contract, because once you sign it, you know, those things, it's contract. You know, that's just how it works. It's kind of hard to go back later and say, well, I want more.
Yeah.
I think something else. And also what I said and what you heard, even in the best of circumstances, are not necessarily the same thing, even on details that you wouldn't think matter. So having it spelled out gives somebody else the chance to say, oh, I thought you meant this. And, to kind of work through all that. So it also heads off any potential hurt feelings later or problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And our shared universe contracts for anthologies specifically mention it's like, well, most of this belongs to the universe. So when you create these situations, they may come up again. You have a right to the story and you can then publish it later, but the universe is not yours. But that doesn't mean you can now write something else within the universe for somebody else. It's all spelled out in the contract for how that works.
I think too that you want to keep in mind if you're writing novels, in a scenario where you're always going to be in a royalty share situation, you're basically creating a lifelong partnership with somebody else. You are going to be, at least in some respects, dealing with them forever, unless you try to buy out the story or they buy the story out for you. But you're probably looking at least 5 to 7 years where you are be in communication with those people. There's be money changing hands. So make sure it's, people that you want to be in communication with and dealing with. Don't decide that you want to just like make some money right now and get in bed with someone you don't like, because you'll regret that.
And also, I'm 61, so this comes to my mind. You'll actually be dealing with, your estate will be dealing with it as well. And so you want a really good contract so that the next person, whoever you left it to, doesn't have to guess at what was said between two people. It's all right there. It makes it so much easier.
Oh, and if you've created a universe or you're going to do it, pretty soon on, get a will. Because if you've got family, a loved one, children, without any of that, the courts decide what happens to it. And if 20 years from now, your universe of 3 or 4 books is suddenly movies and all the rest.
Right.
You really want judges and lawyers to decide what happens to your stuff? It's better to lay it out right.
It's
not that hard. You can do it in legal Zoom. I mean, it's not hard.
You can tell who the oldest ones are in this particular panel.
Yeah, it's like I'm making a note to myself over here. Yeah, well, I think we are just about out of time here, so why don't we just go around the circle and let everyone know where they can find you and your universe and your other work.
I'll go. So if you go to marthacarr.com, you can find every book. We update it all the time, or you can go to my Amazon page. But if you go to marthacarr.com, we break it out by series and sort of so you can navigate through, and we'll also tell you here's where you start if you're brand new to us, so that you're not jumping in the middle wondering who these people are. So that's probably the best way. But if you can also look at the Amazon page and see so much.
Yeah, for me, you can go to aeon14.com. That's AEON14.com. There's a link right at the top saying start here, or there's one that says all the books, and you can go there and it lists out all the series. At the top, there's actually a link to a spreadsheet, because I found that my readers are such nerds that a spreadsheet's actually the best thing to give them, and it just gives them just a chronological reading order through everything. So that's the best way to dive in as well.
For me, you can check myself out. Yeah, having a unique name helps. You can just go to Amazon and type in my name, Mark Wandrey. And in fact, you can just type Wandrey, you're going to get everything with me, except like some guy in Germany that's published some books on biochemistry. So it's pretty easy to tell what's me and what's not. On Facebook, I've got a presence there. You can go to look me up, or you can simply put in the number 4, letter H, letter U, 4HU. That's the Four Horsemen universe. And you can see all of our fan organizations that come up with stuff. So, and my personal website is www.worldmaker.us. That's my personal presence.
Pretty good one, Mark. You grabbed that Worldmaker. Good for you.
Out of a long time. Well, without US, I couldn't get COM. Somebody else has. Actually, that's owned by somebody. So, you know how that.
And you can find out everything about the Catechol universe at catechol.com, which will take you to a page that's a subset of my amyduboff.com that has all of my works on it. But if you are specifically looking for the Catechol universe, catechol.com is the place to go. And you can find me on social media at amyduboff on most of the major platforms. So thank you all so much for the wonderful discussion. And thank you to all of the viewers who joined us today. I hope you have a great rest of the convention.